All right, welcome to another episode of The More You Know. And today's episode is going to be strictly finance and how we can get our finances back in place and what we can start doing today to make sure that we retire comfortably. Today's guest, I have Alex. Alex, can you give us a brief introduction?
Absolutely. My name is Alex, and I'm the host of the Main Street Finance Podcast. I talk about financial literacy and getting some education, and I tend to lean towards breaking down everything so you understand all the moving parts and not just the main idea. So I tend to ramble a little bit, but you're going to learn everything you never knew you wanted to learn.
How did you get into finance? Because I feel like a lot of people today are not really financially literate, and that's because people blame it on the schooling system that we didn't really learn this stuff when we were in school. So, how did you get into finance and how did you learn about it?
Well, honestly, it depends on how far back you turn the clock. If we're going back all the way, it's mostly because my parents never did the best things or made the most, let's say, efficient choices in their financial lives. And it's just always been a sort of, even as a kid or a teenager, it was like, why don't they know these things? Like, why aren't they whatever? Like, something's not right here. So I always had that interest in finance and money, and especially investing. That always intrigued me. But high school, college, never really know about it. And then in the middle of my college, let's say journey, I decided to switch and become a finance major. So I switched to be a finance major, and then I was in a class learning the future value equation, which is a very basic equation that they teach everybody who gets a degree in finance. But I started doing some random math and realized that it's very easy to retire early. So I kind of stumbled myself upon financial independence and retiring early. So then I was like, well, someone's got to be talking about this. So I searched it out and I found that there actually is a FIRE movement. So I followed that for a couple years until I graduated college and then graduated, got my first job, got my second job, and I actually work in finance. So I have an honors degree in finance and I've worked in the banking industry for about 5 years now.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I can tell you that when I was in college, I was really invested into the fire movement. I first heard of it. I actually first found it on Reddit when I was looking on r/investing, and then someone pointed me to the fire movement, and then and then that just got me into a rabbit hole of just watching financial YouTubers. My main favorite one is Graham Stephan. He's one of my favorite ones, but he's the one that really got me into saving money and getting started in the fire movement. To start off, for people that are older but still want to be financially independent and retire early, what would you say is the best course of action for them to take if they're significantly older, say 30s, mid 30s, or even late 30s?
Well, this is sort of a stereotypical kind of answer, but it depends on the age group. Like if we're talking 40s, 50s, or even 60s, because honestly, I have an aunt that's in her 60s who's like, okay, so now how do I build investing for retiring? And I'm like, you're kind of late. But the lower you get, obviously, the more opportunities you have. So, like, if you're in your 40s, you are far from too late. You can reach financial independence by saving don't quote me on these numbers. I think it's like 30% of your income for 15 years, and you can be financially independent. So if you're starting this at 40, you can potentially be there at 55. If you're starting at 40, chances are you're already at a point in your career where you're making solid money. So it's not like, oh, I'm not in my 20s, so I'm too far gone. Now, as far as what can you do, I mean, really, it's all about investing. I would recommend first just getting stock of your situation, and that starts with what's known as a personal financial statement. Essentially, it's this one sheet that has everything you own and then everything you owe on that stuff. So, like on the left hand side, you'd have a car, and then on the right hand side, you have your car loan. So, taking stock of your situation is important. Then you want to get rid of high interest debt, and then you really want to start investing and just taking advantage of your retirement accounts, maybe even some investing outside of it. But really, it can't start until you really get stock of your situation.
Gotcha. And you talk about high interest debt. Do you find it beneficial when people roll over their debt, say on a credit card right now that's giving you like 19% interest, and then you roll that debt over into another credit card that doesn't have, that has one of those, the rates of like, oh, you get 0% interest for the first like year or so. Do you find those beneficial, or do you find those kind of as kind of like a gateway of like potentially getting more debt?
So, this, unfortunately, I got to have this disclaimer somewhere in here, but with most things in finance, there's two sides of every question. There's what's the more mathematically beneficial for it, and what's the most psychologically beneficial for it. So, there's really two answers for your question, but I'm going to go ahead and do both. As far as mathematically, if you're going from, let's say, all your debt is on one credit card and you're paying, let's say, 15% just for fun, if you take that and roll that into another card where you get a 0% interest rate, mathematically that works. But when some people try this, they get, oh, well, if I'm not paying interest for a year, well, then it doesn't hurt me to keep that money on the card. Like if you don't make a, well, you still have to make your normal payments. But if you're trying to pay it down, if you're like, well, it's zero interest for 12 months. So maybe if I, don't make extra payments for 2 months, it still doesn't hurt me because I'm not accruing interest. So psychologically, if that's how you're gonna approach it, it's not gonna help you. Other people might see zero interest rate and go, oh, well, now I can go buy stuff. And, I still got that 12 months. So if I buy stuff for the first two, I still have 10 months to pay it off. So for something like that, you really got to think about it. So if, if you can have the discipline of, hey, I'm going to roll this over and then immediately start paying it down, yeah, it's absolutely fine. Mathematically, you're going to save a whole lot of interest and it's going to work. But you really need to take stock of where you are psychologically, because if you see that as permission to keep doing what you're doing and like, oh, let me just kick this can down the road, it's not going to help. Another thing you need to consider is that a lot of those rollovers charge a transfer fee. So if you owe $10,000 and you're trying to roll that over, typically, like, there's 0% interest, but it's like a maybe 3% transfer fee.
Oh wow.
So you went from owing 10,000 to 13,000. So if the interest you'd save in that transfer isn't worth that fee, then you should probably keep paying that 15%.
That's insane.
Oh yeah, well they got to get their money somewhere. They don't just give you, 12 months interest. They don't just give you 12 months interest only without there being something, without them holding a cross behind their back like, haha, but you didn't read this part of the fine print.
The evil banks, the evil banks.
Oh, come on. Now I take offense to that. Those are credit card companies. Those aren't banks.
Yeah. It's always fun when you just go on like some subreddits and then you just see the banks are the bad guys.
God, I
Bitcoin,
hate that.
Bitcoin, Bitcoin.
This is completely not relevant to anything we're planning on talking about, but I want to throw this out there. So, for the first time in a decade, last year, the U.S. House of Representatives, the subcommittee on finance, called in the CEOs of like the top 8 biggest U.S. banks. And the chairman of that committee, or rather, chairwoman of that committee, started grilling them on what they're doing about the student loan crisis. And they're like, well, what are y'all doing? Y'all lending out all this money. How are you going to do this? um, they went through 3 CEOs saying, "Oh, well, we don't do CEOs." Before finally they got to Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan, and he said, "Well, Madam Chairman or Madam Chairwoman, if you remember, Barack Obama signed a bill that federalized all student loans. All of us here are barred from doing student loans.
Wow.
So banks can't even do student loans anymore, and we're still getting blamed for it."
That's crazy. It's just a lot of it's just I feel like it's just like a big game of telephone of like, all right, we signed this, and then it just gets like told down the line, and then people are getting like the final end result, which is totally different from what happened in the beginning, and that's what people tend to believe.
Well, the problem is no one pays attention or no one cares. Like, I really hate articles where it's like, oh, well, here's Susie Q. She's been paying her student loan payments for the last 20 years and she owes more than she borrowed in the first place. Like, I hate those articles because that just shows people don't understand what they're getting into. And you know what? Since I brought it up, I'm going to go ahead and address that. What happens is if you have a federal student loan, you get what's called income-based repayment. So if you get a college degree and your after college career pays $30,000, well, then there's a cap. I want to say it's 10%, that the only amount you can pay towards your student loans is 10%. So in this scenario, $3,000 a year. Well, if your interest rates on your loan are 5%, well, then yeah, you're making your payments, but there's $2,000 of interest that isn't being paid. So where does that go? That goes to your loan balance. So your balance is, after the first year, is $2,000 more than what you borrowed. And I mean, if you continue that trend, it's just going to grow faster and faster. It's compound interest against you. And then they say, oh, well, I've been cheated. Well, you spent 20 years paying less than what you were supposed to because you were just like, haha, I got this income based repayment, so now I don't have to make the full payments. Well, you kind of put yourself in that situation.
You're not wrong. And I feel like this is the stuff that a lot of people don't know, or they're not told about, or no one tells them about this stuff. And it's just kind of, it's just them signing a loan just to follow the the normalcy of getting a degree in the United States, really.
That's what it is. What it is pure ignorance and no financial education at all. If you ask me, like if I was the president and I could sign something that would get unanimously approved, I would make it a requirement that if you're getting a student loan, you need to sit down with someone in the finance department of, the school, because I'd make the schools responsible for this because they're providing the degree. Where it's like, okay, so here's what we charge per semester. For 8 semesters, this is going to cost you $50,000. So at the end, it's $50,000. Your interest rate is going to be this percent. So your payments are going to be this much. Let's say your payments are $1,000 a month. Well, you want to graduate in art and be an art teacher. Well, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, art teachers make this much money. So your rent is looking like, and then do like a fake budget. Like, okay, your rent is going to be approximately this much, this much, this much. So your total income for a month is $3,000, but your total student loan payments are going to be $1,000. So you're going to be spending 33% of your income on this loan. So do you still want this loan?
That's a good way of putting it. That's a very good way of putting it, and I definitely do think that it should be up to the colleges to provide that because they're the ones that are setting the rates for tuition. So they are going to really dictate of how much you are going to have to take out. Really,
Yeah, to steal Dave Ramsey's metaphor that he used, if you're going to offer a $30,000 degree in left-handed puppetry, like you're kind of responsible for the person not being able to get the job. Like they could have just not proved it, but in the end of the day, colleges, it's sales. Here's why you should come to our school. Here's how we'll set you up for the future. We've got a wonderful alumni association. We will get you a job afterward. College just sells an education. So if they sell you on a useless degree, it's kind of their fault. I mean, it's also your fault for falling for it, not doing your due diligence. But primarily, I'd call that predatory marketing.
indeed, I totally do agree with that. Next thing I wanted to talk about is more about investing. Really, any like I know that there are a few accounts that people should be really wary of. Let's talk about a Roth IRA to start with. You mind explaining what a Roth is?
Sure, let me do this first because I do this explanation a lot, and I find if I start with this, it makes life a lot easier later on in the explanation. So there's a couple words that get thrown around a lot when it comes to retirement investing. Typically, those are 401k, IRA, traditional, and Roth. So we're talking about two categories here. You have traditional versus Roth, and those are tax treatments. Those are not accounts. Those are tax treatments. They're adjectives. They're not its own, it's not a noun. It's not its own account. And then you have a 401k versus an IRA. Those are the nouns. Those are their own accounts. So I see a lot of people kind of mixing up the terminology here, but that's what it is. So your account type, the thing you open and contribute to, is a 401k or an IRA. Now there's a couple others, but those are the two biggest. And then within each of those, you can have a traditional or a Roth, which is just a tax treatment. It is not a different kind of account. So definitely want to throw that out there first. Now, going along there, here's the primary difference. With a 401k, those are employer sponsored plans. So they're your accounts, or rather, the money is for you, but they're not really managed by you. It's done by your employer. And the only way you can contribute to it is by having money come out of your paycheck. Then let's talk about an IRA. An IRA is an individual retirement arrangement, or its account. Honestly, I hear it go back and forth, but it's the point here. But the point here is it's individual. No one's going to help you. You reached out to a broker, said, "Hey, I would like to open this IRA." They said, "Swag, we're going to need $1,000 to open this account." You gave them the $1,000. It's yours. No one else touches it. It's just an arrangement between you and the investment company. With the 401k, it's you, the investment company, and your boss, or rather, your company. So those are the main differences. You can't have a 401k unless your company offers it to you. Alternatively, you can open up as many IRAs as you want.
With IRAs, they've been touted as one of the best things to make you a millionaire, and
Hmm.
all you gotta do is just start young. Can you talk about really what's the benefits of the Roth and the limitations of the Roth?
Well, there's really one limitation and a lot of benefits. So, a lot of times when you're talking about the pros and cons of the IRA, it is in reference to comparing it to a 401k. So, let's kind of compare and contrast the two. So, because the 401k is with your employer and the IRA is just you, your employer gets charged based upon how many options you are allowed to invest in. So, because of that, your company may offer you anywhere between 10 and maybe 50. Honestly, it's whatever they want, but typically maybe 10 to 30 investment choices. So you have to put your life savings in one of those 30 things, or one or more, however you want to split it up. Then you have an IRA. Since your employer isn't a part of that and there's no charging for availability, it's just you and the investment company. So, because of that, when you have an IRA, you are able to invest in anything and everything that you want with no restrictions because there is no employer that is there kind of holding your hand and opening the account for you. So, an IRA can be better than a 401k because you go from infinite investing options to between 10 and 30, depending on how generous your company is. And then on top of that, there is no guarantee as far as the quality of those investment choices. I mean, for all you know, the guy who's in HR that's selecting what funds you're available to invest in doesn't know what he or she is doing. And so all your options might be really expensive or just really trash. Meanwhile, with an IRA, you can do your own research. You can look in and invest in really anything and everything that can be publicly traded.
It's a lot more freedom with your Roth IRA.
Absolutely.
Like if you think Tesla's gonna go to $2,000 in the future, just go all in on Tesla. But
You
that's
could,
that's
I
kind of the
wouldn't recommend
beauty.
it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that brings us to another point. So I've kind of neglected the limitation there. So you have that, but typically because your company is doing this for you, 90% of the time you can't invest in individual stocks. Those 10 to 30 choices are all mutual funds. The one exception to that is that a company may allow you to purchase company stock. So if you work for Tesla, you might be able to buy Tesla stock in your 401k. If you work for Walmart, you might be able to buy Walmart stock in your 401k. So let's get to the limitations here. So the limitations are, let's go ahead and start with the IRA because that one's the chosen son. So a limitation on the IRA is that you can only put in $6,000 per year. Now that amount changes with really inflation every year. The IRS decides what that number is going to be. So I think as of now, it's still 6,000. It might be 6,200. I think they might have just recently raised it. But honestly, if you're listening to this in the future, you're going to want to Google it because it can change every year. With a 401k, technically, the limit is about $50,000 that you can put in per year. But
What?
yeah, that's what companies don't want to tell you. So
That's a
the
lot.
the actual IRS limit is like $50,000, but the amount that you as the employee can put in is 19,000. So the total limit is about 50-ish. It's somewhere around there. And that's you plus your company putting in money. So like matches, bonuses, whatever. But as far as you by yourself, totally exception, totally without your company contribution, you can put in about 19,000. And just like the 6,000 with the IRA, that's subject to change by the IRS every year. So you're going to want to look that up depending on what year you are listening to this.
So, why do they put limitations on these accounts? Really?
Well, because these are what's known as tax advantaged accounts. So if you invest using these accounts, you are going to get some form of tax benefit. So the IRS is kind of, well, not really the IRS. The federal government is sort of offering you a discount on your taxes if you save for retirement. Because if you don't save for retirement, you're going to end up being, quote unquote, a burden on the country. So, like, you're going to start taking food stamps, you're going to start getting Medicaid, like, you're going to use a lot more government benefits, and that costs money. Meanwhile, they can just give you a slight tax break and you save for your own retirement, then the government doesn't have to take care of you when you retire.
I never really thought of it like that. That's a very good way of putting it.
Absolutely. It's always a con. So so because it's tax savings, because they're giving you a discount, there's a limit on the discount that they're willing to give you. So they put those contribution limits on there because they're trying to limit how much in tax savings you can get.
Wow. For me, I like I wish that I started investing when I was younger. I waited until I was like 22 or so to open my own Roth, but
Hmm.
I can tell you that with well, like especially with like last year too, like it was such a good time to start investing, just because there's a slight dip. So if you bought in when the market was in a slight dip, then you could see some great returns. But yeah, I definitely agree that Roth IRA is the most beneficial way to go, only because the amazing tax benefits that you do get in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It can definitely do wonders for your savings.
But you did talk about a traditional IRA, and I feel like that's one that isn't really talked about much because Roth is like the one in the spotlight all the time. What exactly is a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k?
Absolutely. So, as I said before, your account types, or rather your nouns here, are IRA and 401k. Note now, no matter which of those you have, they can be either traditional versus Roth. So, traditional was how 401ks were first invented. I say invented, but they were written into law by Congress. And then Roth came along a couple years later, fun fact, because the senator who introduced it was Senator Roth. So that's why it's called a Roth, IRA or 401k. So what those are adjectives. Those are the tax treatments. So I had said before that these are beneficial tax savings accounts. So here's how we get into how you save the taxes. With a traditional account, whether IRA or 401k, what happens is you do not pay taxes on that money this year. So it's tax free for now. You put it in the account grows, and then when you need that money and you pull it out, you pay taxes on the flip side when you're pulling that money out. With a Roth, it's the opposite. You pay the taxes this year, and then the funds grow, and then eventually when you need it and you pull it out, you don't get taxed. So it's a question of, do you want to get taxed now or do you want to get taxed later?
So the contribution limits for a Roth IRA is $6,000. Uh, does the traditional share the same limit as the Roth? So if you have a Roth and you contributed
Yes.
$3,000, are you only limited to $3,000 in your traditional then?
Yes, the limits are by account type, not tax treatment.
So briefly, I wanted to go over before we start talking about just like long term or short term investing.
Hmm. Sure. Rollovers, it's a fancy term. I mean, it's a transfer. That's all it is. So all a rollover is hey, you have this money in this account. Oh, well, you know what? I'd like it in this account over here. Oh, okay. Well, you got to do a rollover. So it's more consolidation or you're transferring assets. So let me go ahead and give you an example. So you graduate from college, you work for company A for 3 years. Well, through that 3 years, you wanted to be responsible. So you put money in your 401k. Well, company B comes along, sees you, and says, hey, I'll give you a raise if you come work for me. You say, hell yeah. So you put in your 2 weeks, you quit your job there, you go to company B. Again, wanting to look out for your financial future, you start contributing to your 401k. So you keep doing that for a couple of years, and then finally, company C comes along and is like, hey, you look excellent. Like, you have a great resume. You know what? How would you like to be in management? You say, hell yeah, put in your 2 weeks, go to company C, start working for them. Well, at this point, you now have three 401ks. You have your one at company A, your one at company B, and your one at company C. So typically, how the tax law works is that if your 401k has over, I think it's $5,000 at the time you leave a job, that company has to keep managing your funds. So they can't just say, hey, you left us. Why are we stuck with holding your account? That's not how it works. Unless you want to move it, they have to keep it open if you have over whatever that number is. I'm pretty sure it's 5,000.
Hmm.
So at this point in your life, you've got three 401ks. Now, let's go back and let's talk about investment options. So, again, each employer gets to put in their own funds. Well, if company A has a lot of really crap investment choices, but company C rules, well, you can always roll over, or it's a transfer. You could always roll over your company A 401k into your company C 401k. And all that means is they take whatever investments you had in your company A 401k, and then now it's in your company C 401k. So it's just a balance transfer, really. Typically, they move over your assets, but sometimes they do what's called a liquidation, which just means they sell everything and then send the cash. So rolling over is just a way to, hey, I've got 401ks, or I've got 3 401ks. Let's go ahead and get them all to one 401k with my current employer. And then you can do the same thing with IRAs. So if you have 2 or 3 IRAs, which I don't know why you would, you could roll them over to where they're all together and you just have one big fund.
I know that one of my buddies earlier last year, he was like, do something with like this account and roll it over in this, and I was like, dude, that seems just like a lot of work. And no, I'm not gonna take that much time into doing so.
Oh, it doesn't
But
take long at all.
really,
Yeah, there's a lot of companies. Oh, and I should mention this as well. What you could do. So let's go back to our scenario. You've got companies A, B, and C, and you've got a 401k with each. So once you leave a company, you can no longer contribute to that 401k, because the only way you can contribute to a 401k is through payroll deductions. So if you're working for company C, you are no longer working for company A. Therefore, there is no payroll for you to deduct a contribution from. So you have a choice. Do you want to roll over your company A and B 401ks into your company C 401k? Or you can roll it over into an IRA, which again, you get the benefits of being able to invest in anything as opposed to just what company C offers you. So that's another decision you can make.
and my final topic that I wanted to talk about is investing, really, because I know that in today's world, it's very, very easy to start investing with zero fee trading, starting with Robinhood. Robinhood makes it so easy for people to get into the stock market, because I know that a lot of people are trying to flip a quick buck into hoping that they can day trade and make money every single day by doing that. Can you talk about the benefits of actually holding long term versus short term?
Absolutely. So I'm going to start off with this. First off, I do not recommend Robinhood. If you just Google Robinhood issues, they have a
There's
lot
a
of
lot.
yeah, they have a lot of technical issues. They get a lot of problems. I think they're currently under a lawsuit from the SEC for quote unquote gamifying investing and trying to specifically target younger investors. Like, ooh, look, this is fun. You're not, crazy risking your money that you could possibly lose at all. Come on, have fun, buy some Tesla. So personally, I stopped recommending Robinhood a while ago. If we're talking about easy, I do recommend this one. And I just want to put out there at first that I do not receive any money from them. I'm not affiliated with them, but I've used them for about a year now, and I absolutely love the service. So this broker is called M1 Finance.
Oh, I
So
love
what?
M1.
Oh, right. So what they do differently is that with every broker, you have to go in, deposit the money, and then do each trade. I want 10 shares of Coke, 10 shares of Walmart, whatever, and you have to do that each time. With M1, you can go in there and say, I want 10% of my portfolio to be Coca Cola. I want 10% of my portfolio to be Walmart. I want 5% to be Starbucks, et cetera, et cetera. And then from that point on, all you have to do is make a deposit. They are going to look at your stock holdings and then put that money to where it needs to go to keep you at those percentages. So once you set what you want your portfolio to be, all you have to do is deposit. And then they have a whole lot of automatic withdrawal stuff. So let me tell you what I do personally. I have my portfolio set up, and then I have a recurring transaction set up in M1 that the day after I get paid, they go in, take a couple $100 out of my account, which just received my paycheck, and then they just invest it. So I don't even have to think about funding my Roth IRA, because I mean, I get paid and the next day M1 comes and takes a couple $100. It gets invested how I wanted it to because I already told them what I wanted. And then it's just automatic. I don't even have to think about it.
Yeah, I can definitely say that for me, I love M1. M1 is the provider that I like using for my Roth, only because I like the pie system, as you touched upon. And so you can basically just set the percentages of how much of like how much of your portfolio you want as one stock, and I like that option. It's a very simple option for people who just want to be in like a wide variety of stocks, and then it's kind of like a set it and forget it type of thing because like you do, I have that recurring with withdrawal from my account every single paycheck, and it withdraws it and they automatically invest it into my portfolio. So I find that really easy. So I'm really glad that you touched upon that, and I'm glad to know that there's people out there that also use M1, because I feel like a lot of people go toward the very popular brokerages like
Yeah, the big three.
Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab.
And those are the big three. just just for the record. But I just realized I completely dodged your original question by ranting on Robinhood. As far as long-term investing, every study that has ever been done shows that long-term investing beats short-term investing. Now, what does that mean? That means that not every person wins, but if you're taking 100 people that invest for the long term, buy a company for 5 or 10 years versus buy it this week and try to sell it next week, those people win almost every time, and certainly far more than the short-term people. Because you got to keep in mind, if you have a, let's say, 20% success rate at really picking good stuff. Well, all you got to do is pick them right for the long term a couple times, and then you're solid. But if you're trading every single day and just, okay, I'm like day trading, I'm going to buy these 10 stocks today, sell them at the end of the day, buy them tomorrow. If you have a certain rate of success and you're buying and selling all the time, that 80% is really going to come and kill you. But if you're in it for the long term, typically even the companies that do poorly do well in the long term, because in the short term it's all about the news. Like, oh, the CEO stepping down. CEO stepping down, everyone sells, stock price goes down 10%. But over the long term, it's not about what the CEO is doing or what they said on a conference call that ended up getting them fired, or the day-to-day stuff like, oh my god, this Christmas was worse than last Christmas, let's hurry up and sell, drop the stock 10%. Because if you just fast forward 10 years, like, sure, they had all that BS that happened in between, but in 10 years, the company's still around. The company's making more money. The company's doing better than it was. It's less day to day nonsense and more the health of the company. So long term wins just about every time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like a lot of people are really stuck without seeing the big picture.
Well, it's like a casino. Like, you can win a couple hands, or if you go to if you go play the slots, you can keep winning. But the longer you keep trying to play the game, the house always wins.
That is
Meanwhile,
true.
if you do that one thing, like just invest in the market, like the house might win or lose depending on the hand, but on a long enough timeline, the house always wins. Same thing. If you're trying to do short term investments, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes you win really big, sometimes you lose really big. But over the long run, the house always wins. In this case, you're the house. So if we're talking about the day to day stuff, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. If you're in it for 5 or 10, 20 years, house always wins.
Hmm. Yeah. Can you touch upon the tax reasons, like short-term capital gains versus a long-term capital gains?
Sure.
What are the taxes of it, and kind of if you have an example that you can pull out of your pocket to kind of like show the significance of it,
Oh,
please
I
do
can
so.
always pull examples out of my pocket. So it goes like this. There are two types of capital gains. You have long term and short term. Short term, as defined by the IRS, is anything less than a year. So it doesn't matter if you bought today and sold today, or if you bought today and sold 364 days from here. Uh, you're going to get that short term capital gains tax. So short term capital gains tax is whatever your total tax rate is. So if you are in the 24% tax bracket right now, well, then those capital gains taxes are going to be at about 24%. Long-term capital gains are assets that you've held for more than a year, goes to the capital gains tax rates, which is an entirely different table, which I believe I think the first like maybe $40,000 is tax free, and then 40,000 to 80,000 is maybe 15%, and then 80,000 and up is maybe 25 or 30%, something like that. But at the range that we're likely to be in for most of our lives, the long-term capital gains tax is going to be much lower than your short-term capital gains tax or whatever you're currently earning right now. And then an example, because I almost just forgot the example. So for an example, you bought Tesla at $200, or let's see, what's more realistic? So let's say in 2020 you bought Tesla for about $300. Well, let's say 7 months later they did the split and everything, and split adjusted, they're up to, I don't know, let's say $900. I already lost track. What did I say the first price was?
You bought in Tesla $300, and then they split, and now it's $900.
Okay, so you bought Tesla at 300, and 9 months later Tesla's at 800. Well, if you sell now, that's a $600 capital gains. That's a $600 per share capital gain. So, do you want to pay, let's say, 24% on that capital gain, or do you want to hold it for a year and pay potentially zero? Or if you're in the next tax bracket above that, 15%, which 15% definitely beats 24.
Yeah,
So, long term is almost always cheaper.
yeah, and yeah, I think that's a big thing that people overlook is the amount of taxes that you get dinged for. Like in this scenario, 15% versus a 24%. People may overlook that difference of 9% of being not that much. Like, oh, that's 9% difference isn't a lot, but if you hit big, and you look at your total capital gains, like that 9% difference adds up really quick.
Oh yeah, especially because if you keep doing, assuming you're a day trader, you're not just like day trader. You're trading every week or every month, whatever. There's a lot of variability here in less than a year. Like if you do that a lot, you're trading a lot. So if you held Tesla for 2 years, well, that's one sell. But if you're trying to buy and sell every day or every week, every time you sell, you're generating either a capital gain or a capital loss, and you're going to get taxed every single time.
Is there a way to offset capital gains with your capital losses?
Absolutely. It's a net number. So let's say you bought Tesla and then you bought Nikola.
Oh God, not Nikola.
So let's say hypothetically you had a $1,000 gain in Tesla and then a $500 loss in Nikola. Well, then in that case, you're taxed on your net capital gain. So you're not paying your taxes every time you do a sell transaction. What happens is your broker is charged by the IRS to keep track of your cumulative gains and losses. So in January, when you receive your W 2 from your employer, you're also going to receive a 1099, I think it's an I, 1099 I for investing, or it might be a 1099 MISC or miscellaneous. So you're going to receive a tax form at the end of the year that's going to show every stock you bought, every stock you sold, what you bought at, what you sold at, and what your gain or loss is. So at the end of it, at the end of the page, there's going to be a number that says overall, this is what you had in gains slash losses. So if net you earned $1,000 on Tesla, lost $500 on Nikola, and that was all you did, well, your overall gain was $500. So you're going to get taxed on that.
And that's the beauty of it.
Well, here's the fun part. You you can claim negative capital gains on your taxes and kind of get yourself a discount, but that's capped at 3 grand.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's capped. You can have infinite gains and just pay taxes on infinite amounts of money. But as far as getting a tax break on loss, like if you had a bad, if you went all in on Nikola this year, and then Nikola dropped 60% after it was found out they're basically the entire company's a fraud. If you lost $10,000 and like you sold out and you were just jaded from investing and decided, you know what, I'm not doing this again. Yeah, you lost $10,000, but the IRS is only going to let you credit 3,000.
That's
So
very interesting.
well, of course, they don't
Yes,
want to give you too big of a break on taxes.
that's true. That's true. I can personally say, thankfully, I was in Nikola in the SPAC phase of it, and a little bit when it changed its ticker, but thankfully I got out. And still made a decent gain, but oh man, just watching that stock go down and down and down, I'm like, oh
Before it
god.
coasted downhill.
It was kind of, it was kind of, I can't lie, like it was kind of entertaining, like watching like the drama happen with it, because once that uh report came out, oh my god,
Oh yeah, that was fun. The
stuff
company
was
went down
insane.
like the Hindenburg, that's for sure.
Yeah, but but yeah, that's all the time that we have today. Where can my listeners find you on your social medias?
So, just to start off with, my podcast can be found basically anywhere except for Stitcher. Apparently, that's the one spot I'm not at. But Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, I'm now on Amazon, Spotify, all the big ones, and that's just Main Street Finance, and that street is ST, so Main ST Finance. And then my email address, which feel free to send me questions if you want. Luckily, I'm still a small enough podcaster to where I can respond to just about any email. That's going to be mainstfinance@gmail.com. And then you can find me on Twitter. Unfortunately, someone stole at Main Street Finance, so I am at Main Street Money. So you can find me there. It's the same emblem across everything except on Apple, which for some reason isn't downloading the bottom 2/3 of my picture.
What the heck?
Yeah, I called their support and they're like, "Yeah, we have no idea." So you're kind of
That's
out of
always
luck.
fun. Technical
So
difficulties.
shout out to Apple. But yeah, the easiest ways to reach me is you can hit me up on Twitter at Main Street Money or send me an email, mainstfinance@gmail.com.
And everything that Alex just listed will be in the description of this podcast. So if you guys want to check him out and learn more about finance, head over to his podcast. Alex, it was a pleasure talking with you. I'm really glad that you were able to actually come in here and explain these financial literacy terms like I'm five. So I really do appreciate that, and I think this is a very easy way for people to digest financial literacy.
Absolutely. And look, if you ever want me back, I had a fun time. I'll come back.
Hey, I'll take you up on that. There's so much about finance that I've learned in the past like year or so just from watching YouTubers that that I see people on Facebook posting. Why didn't we learn about this in school? Like school should have taught us how to taxes. School should have taught us how to budget and all that. But
I agree.
that's a whole new rabbit hole where um it's just kind of, I just feel like it's kind of based on the person. Like you can easily learn it online of like how people do it and then just kind of whip it out of like for it to match up with your lifestyle really. But
Absolutely.
that's a whole new conversation. But yeah, thank you for coming on and it was a pleasure talking.
Absolutely. It was good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye. All right, and that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this show of The More You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It'll certainly help me out in the algorithm, and be sure to subscribe or follow to The More You Know on your favorite podcasting platform like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And lastly, if you would like to contribute to The More You Know, you can head over to anchor.fm// The More You Know Pod and contribute any monetary value to help the quality of the show, and in the future bring on some more interesting guests. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate all of my listeners, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.